Reverend Elizabeth is celebrating the ordination of a new colleague. Her reflections on roots, the things that help us stay grounded, and wings, the things that help us find courage, have been pre-recorded. So you'll get to see her even though she's not live with us. These times are turbulent and scary and exciting, and we need both of these things. The resilience to stay rooted in our deep values and the courage to act for justice and love. So let's center down. I have my singing bowl, and we'll see if you can hear it on Zoom. This is the first time I've ever rung a bowl on Zoom. Whoever you are, wherever you come from, whatever your beliefs, whomever you love, and however bumpy your life's journey, know that you are welcome here. We are hoping that everyone has a chalice or a candle to light and something to light it with. If you do, gather it now and let's light it together.
I believe we're in the midst of a sea change. Our nation has woken up to the realities of racism and police brutality. And we are doing our best to discern what we can do to ride the tide. For surely this awakening will bring us that much closer to the world we dream of. For our opening words, I offer these from my colleague, Christian Grassel-Schmidt. Let us wake up, not just from the Sunday morning exhaustion, from the wish for a few more drowsy minutes in bed. Let us wake up to this world we live in, to its beauty and wonder, and also to its tragedy and pain. We must wake up to this reality that not all in our world have what we do, however much or little that is. We must wake up to the idea that our wholeness, our lives, are only as complete as the lives of those around us, of those we are inextricably tied to in a great web of mutuality, of which all of us are part. We must stay woke, in the words of our friends and colleagues involved in Black Lives Matter, working every day for racial justice in our country. Let us wake up, let us stay awake, let us stay woke. And now, in this time and place, let us worship together.
Touch the earth, reach the sky, walk on shores while spirits fly, over the ocean, over the land, our faith, our quest to understand. Touch the earth, reach the sky, children ask the reasons why, in our lives the answers show, and by our love they learn and grow. Touch the earth, reach the sky, all are born and all shall die. Life's the time left in between, to follow a star, to build a dream. Touch the earth, reach the sky, hug the laughter, feel the cry. May we see where we can give, for this is what it means to live. Touch the earth, reach the sky, soar with courage ever high, spirits joining as we fly.
to pause for just a moment to engage in the practice of generosity. For those of you who are able to make a financial contribution, you'll notice 3 options for managing the logistics on your screen. We'd invite you to either copy down the information you need or simply go to the website to make a donation. I'll put the web address in the chat in just a moment. Those of you who are newer or visiting from another part of the country may not be aware that we typically give away all of the cash from our Sunday offerings to local charities whose mission align with our values. It's a program we call the Month of Sundays. This month, the recipient is Weekend Food for Kids, a program we started jointly with St. Mark's Episcopal Church that provides bags of healthy food to kids from food insecure homes. We pack over 100 bags a week for 11 weeks. And last year, we actually had to spend about $1,000 more than we received in donations and grants. So please contribute if you can. Our online donation system includes a drop-down menu that allows you to choose where you'd like your money to go. If you're mailing or dropping off a check, simply indicate in the memo line where it's intended, if it's for the Month of Sundays or our general fund. In the spirit of love and for the continuing work of this church, we will now take some time to practice generosity as the offertory is played.
Will you breathe with me? Will you pray with me? Spirit of life, Spirit of love, known by many names throughout the ages, be with us in these times of uncertainty, in these times of isolation, in these times of unrest, in these times of change. Help us to know ourselves to be active participants, strong and resilient, able not just to weather, but to affect change. Help us sink our roots deep. Help us rise to the occasion. Help us learn and grow and stretch. And help us remember in the midst of all this to rest and take exquisite care of our precious selves. In this complex and complicated world, always shifting, always transforming, may we welcome new realities, new ideas, new ways of being, new visions of what a just and kind society might look like. May we be brave and fierce as we work for justice in accordance with our own conscience. May we never forget that all that we do and all that we are, all our striving and struggling is for love's sake, and love's sake alone. Amen, and blessed be. Our first reading is The Jack Pine by Howard Thurman. The seed of the jack pine will not be given up by the cone unless the cone itself is subjected to sustained and concentrated heat. The forest fire sweeps all before it, and there remain but the charred reminders of a former growth and a former beauty. It is then in the midst of the ashes that the secret of the cone is exposed. The tender seed finds the stirring of life deep within itself, and what is deepest in the seed reaches out to what is deepest in life. The result? A tender shoot, gentle roots, until at last there stands straight against the sky the majestic glory of the jack pine. It is not too far afield to suggest that there are things deep within the human spirit that are firmly embedded, dormant, latent, and inactive. These things are always positive, even though they may be destructive rather than creative. But there they remain until our lives are swept by the forest fire. It may be some mindless tragedy, some violent disclosure of human depravity, or some moment of agony in which the whole country or nation may be involved. The experience releases something that has been locked up within all through the years. If it be something that calls to the deepest things in life, we may, like the jack pine, grow tall and straight against the sky. Hello, beloveds. Through the miracle of technology, I'm actually able to fulfill a lifelong dream, which is to be in two places at one time. So I'm with you via a recorded message, and I will be in person with the good folks of the Kitsap UU Fellowship in Bremerton, where I used to serve. You may remember that I was scheduled to preach at the installation, actually at the ordination of one of my former congregants into the Unitarian Universalist ministry. And I wasn't able to go. It was canceled. The event was postponed because of COVID and rescheduled for this Sunday. So rather than scrambling and trying to find somebody else to fill in for me, we decided to experiment a little bit with recorded messages. So what I'm going to talk about today, actually in both of the two places I'm going to manage to be simultaneously, is the metaphor of roots and wings. You've probably heard the saying, give your children two things, give them roots and give them wings. I'm sure that my colleague Mary Gregolia had heard that and incorporated the metaphors into her beautiful hymn, Spirit of Life, which we've just heard so beautifully rendered. And so we're going to look at roots and we're going to look at wings and let these metaphors sort of guide us as we consider what life is asking of us in these crazy, crazy times. How are we being invited into leadership? How are we being invited into growth and being human? So, starting with roots. Roots actually are an adaptation that plants came up with when they evolved from being water-based to being land-based. So, water plants, seaweed and such, some of them need anchors, but they don't even necessarily need that. They're able to get everything that they need, all of the nutrients, the oxygen from the water, the sunlight, by being in one place. But when they evolved to come on land, of course, the things that they needed were in different places. So up above ground were the light and the air, and down underground is where they could find the nutrients they needed and the water. And so this is how they evolved. And if we think about what it means to reach deep down to get the nutrients that we need, to get the water, for me, what makes sense in the metaphor is to think about all of the things that we need, and there are things that we need that we find out in the world. Friendship and beauty, and we also need light and air, just like any old plant. But then there are also things that we need that we have to be able to take inside ourselves, and that need to be resources we can draw on from deep within. And when I think about roots, I think about the way we stay grounded, the way we develop our capacity to stay present. I think about the ways that we find strength in solitude, which is different than loneliness or being alone. I think about the spiritual practices that nurture and sustain us. And I think about how we hold on to who we are and our deep values, even in really difficult and challenging circumstances. So when I'm thinking about roots or talking about roots, those are the kinds of qualities that roots evoke for me. So roots have three primary purposes. They anchor the plant, they store energy, and they absorb the water and the nutrients. Now, of course, most plants have their roots underground, which means we can't necessarily see them. I came over to a stream bed here so that we could look a little bit closer at the roots of a willow tree. I find them endlessly fascinating. They're so beautiful, and sometimes I'll lie on my back and look up at them and see what kinds of shapes they take, and let my imagination wander that way. The beginnings of roots exist in the seed, and actually the sort of proto-roots are called radicles. Maybe this says something to us about how the younger generation is generally more radical than the grown people. There are two basic categories of roots. Some plants have tap roots, which is sort of one root that goes all the way down. And some plants have fibrous roots, which means they make connected networks. They're matted. We'll take a closer look at those two kinds of roots back home in my garden, where I feel it's safe and responsible to pull some plants up and actually look at their roots.
I mentioned a few Sundays ago that I've been doing a whole bunch of weeding. It's cathartic, I think, and whenever I feel anxiety, I just come out here and go weed in my garden. Much better than ever. My favorite kind of weeds to pull are weeds like this. It's a thistle, and the reason I like it is it has just one deep taproot, and I find it very satisfying to be able to dig down and get the whole root. And because I can get the whole root, I have a lot of assurance that this particular weed, other kinds of this weed are going to come back with new seeds, but this particular weed is done. It's finished. And I think about the way we can get embedded in our own individual perspective. We go down rabbit holes, kind of like this taproot goes down. And I think when we have that kind of root, when we make that choice to be super individualistic and really only go deep in terms of our own life experience, that it's easier for us to lose our grounding.
Meanwhile, probably my least favorite weed in the garden is actually grass. This causes tension in our house because the rest of the family seem to be big fans of grass, especially the dogs. But I hate the way it encroaches on my garden beds, and it's just so tenacious. And one of the reasons it's so tenacious is that instead of one deep taproot, like the thistles or dandelions, it has these overlapping, entwined networks that connect and strengthen and reinforce, and so I never seem to be able to get it all out. Even, I have to go back year after year and get a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. And, as weeds go, that makes it really frustrating. When we look at the metaphor, though, I think it gives us a lot of insight into what kinds of roots are going to serve us well, especially in times like these. The more we connect, the more we tangle and touch, the more we hold on to each other and lean into those bonds and our networks, the more resilience we're going to have. It means that when we lose grounding temporarily, there's somebody else who we can trust to pick up the work. It means it's easier to stay true to those deep values and find the right balance between the work that we do in the world and the practices that sustain us for the long haul. This moment in time is one where we're being asked to grapple with the difficult truth that the roots of our nation are planted in soil that has been really drenched in the blood of Black and Indigenous people. Much of what we have, much of what we value, we have because our ancestors, those of us who are white, stole and killed and exploited Indigenous and Black bodies. That's not a comfortable legacy to face. It's not a comfortable truth to lean into or to dig our roots down into. And yet, that's what's being asked of us. That's what this moment requires. The thing of it is that we, just like plants, have the capacity to metabolize trauma, to metabolize these hard and painful truths, to use them, to face them, to transform them in ways that are life-giving and allow us to find a new and better way. Some of my favorite trees are the ancient ones, the cedars. Cedars can grow to be 800 to 1,500 years old. And the great sequoias can actually grow to be 3,000 years old. And the interesting thing about these gigantic ancient trees is that they have those fibrous root systems. They have shallow root systems that extend and intertwine, and that's what gives them their strength. I love coming here to Idler's Rest, and one of the things I wonder about is, you look at all of the trees that have been knocked down, and I question, what is it that makes one tree stand strong while another one gets blown over in a storm? And I'm sure the technical answer involves things like soil density and wetness and weight and the angle of the wind and all those things. But one of the things I've wondered about is it seems like a lot of the trees that come down are on either side of a path or of the stream. And it makes me ponder the role that division has if we apply this metaphor. And I know we talk a lot about the partisan division, or I talk a lot about the partisan division and how I think it's destroying our country. But I'm thinking today more about the generational difference. I'm thinking about the differences between younger activists who are angry and hopeless and really just want to burn it all down, and the older activists who believe in reform, in voting, and want to have concrete and practical things to do to make things better. People who still believe in democracy. And I look at those divisions and I see the way they take energy, they take life energy, they take love, they take passion out of the fight. And I think what I want to say in this moment is, if ever there was a time when we need to reach out across those lines, it is now. It is now. You know, back in the 60s, you had Malcolm and you had Martin, and the story that they tell us in school is that Malcolm and Martin were on different sides. We forget Malcolm and Martin were on the same side, and they had profound respect for each other. Differences in tactics doesn't need to lead to division. In this moment, regardless of your opinion about the tactics and the way people are going about driving change, I think all of us need to search our minds and hearts. All of us need to lean as hard as we can in whatever way makes sense for us as individuals into pushing this forward. It really is time. It really is time for us to confront this legacy, for us to find a way forward that holds healing and hope. So, sink your roots into that. I know it's what I'm sinking my roots into these days.
Far beyond the grasp of hands, or light to meet the eye, past the reaches of the mind. There find the key to nature's harmony in an architecture so entwined. Like the birds whose patterns grace the sky and carry all who join in love expanding, the message of peace will rise in flight, taking the weight of the world upon its wings, in the oneness of everything. Peace is in the dance of trees, who stir before the first breath of wind is yet perceived. Trust in the song becoming one with the dance, and all mysteries can be believed. Songs of lives long past that touch our own are written in the earth, ever giving, and now to maintain the harmony gives to us all lives worth living, for the oneness of everything. Still we seek to find a truth that we might understand and reduce to terms defined. Vast and immeasurable time and space, also overwhelmingly designed. Oh, passing years, just might I know the faith that winters in the heart to be reborn in spring, to hear and to feel the pulse of life enters my soul.
The metaphor of wings, of course, has to do with courage, has to do with our willingness to launch ourselves into the unknown. Now, I know for me, anytime I have to do something new, something I've not done before, it brings up anxiety. It makes me nervous. And I have all kinds of techniques and practices that I use to help center down and reassure myself that that it's all going to be okay. One thing that I do is I remind myself of a safety net. The fact that if I'm not perfect on the first try, if I make mistakes, that there's a lot of grace and acceptance. And there are people who are standing by to make sure that I don't land too hard if I fall. I also focus on, my metaphorical wings. What are the things that I trust in myself, my resilience, my creativity, my ability to be present in the moment and hear and see what's needed and find a way forward. So that's the piece that I think works really well with the metaphor of wings. What are the things, what are the ways that we are able to help ourselves feel more secure in our own ability to handle the unknown, to handle challenges. So that's what the metaphor we're going to work with as we look at some very specific wings. One of the things that I find particularly interesting about bees is that if you just pay attention to their aerodynamics, the size of their wings as opposed to the size of their bodies, they shouldn't really be able to fly. So if you dig a little bit into why they are able to fly, it turns out that they have their wings twist and rotate at the joint. So they're extra loosely held on and they're able to make a fluttering motion that allows them to carry heavier loads than they'd be able to carry if they had fixed wings like birds. I often talk about soft knees, strong core, and for me, thinking about bees and their loose wing attachments is sort of like the loose knees. The more flexible we are, the more willing we are to let go of the way things have been, the way we do things, the proper way of doing things, the more capacity we have to carry heavy things, the more capacity we have to dart and bend and sort of find our way to the nourishment that we need. The butterfly, meanwhile, uses that other part of the metaphor, the strong core. It turns out butterflies' wings are fixed, so instead of flapping from their shoulders the way birds do, they actually fold themselves in half with the muscles in their abdomen. This way of flying actually makes them more maneuverable and helps them evade predators. They can turn on a dime. And that makes me think about all of the ways in which our strong dedication to our principles, our connection with who we are and why we are here, helps us respond with agility, with flexibility, with grace, to go to the places that we need to go so that we can dart and hover and find our way. Hummingbirds are equally fascinating in that, unlike other birds, rather than flapping from their shoulders, they actually flap from their wrists. And the scientist who discovered this, their bones are so light you can't see the bones in an X-ray, and so he had to glue platinum beads to the wing joints in order to discover this. But essentially, they flap from their wings, and this allows them to move their wings in a figure 8 motion, which is part of why they can hover instead of just flapping and soaring. for me, what this invites us into, in terms of the metaphor again, is our capacity to see both sides. One of the things I've really been struggling with this week is I'm hearing from younger activists and even from UUA leadership that what we should be pushing for is abolishing the police, getting rid of the police altogether. That's really hard for me to hear because I've worked over the last 5 years. One of the things I heard in Ferguson when I was there was do the work where you are. And so I've worked over the last 5 years to develop a relationship with our local police departments. And I have a great relationship, especially with Chief Fry. So I know that locally, our police officers are really good people. They use minimal force. They have the training they need and the skill. And so if I have the capacity to flip at the wrist, the way hummingbirds do, what I can do is be present to the truth of what we're hearing from people in other places. The fact that the policing is built on a white supremacist foundation of slave catching and slave retrieval, and that white supremacy is baked into the system. We can hear that that's true, and that there are many places where policing is perhaps not redeemable, not reformable, and we really need to find other alternatives. And we can also see and be present to the reality that most of the police officers we know are good people, that the people locally, that the police departments locally do good work and really do protect public safety. And both of those things can be true at the same time. And we can stay in the place where both of those things are true without having to land, without having to have a destination. It's holding the tension. Which brings us to regular birds. And it turns out that most birds of sort of average to large size have beat their wings at about the same rate. So seagulls beat their wings at about 2.6 beats per second. Geese also beat their wings at about 2.5 beats per second. And I'm sure you've all seen the way geese actually work with each other, the Angelus Arian piece about how geese support and help each other as they fly in formation. Hawks flap their wings at about the same speed as geese and gulls. They're one of my favorite birds, though. They're so beautiful. When I see them, they capture my eye, and there seems to be an intelligence there that's lovely. What determines how fast a bird flaps its wings is its size. So the bigger the bird, the fewer flaps it does. The more capacity it has to soar, the more lift it has naturally, and the more likely it is to ride thermals and find ways to minimize its effort. Of course, the bigger it is, the more efficient it wants to be in the air. The largest land bird in North America is the California condor. It has a 9.8 foot wingspan, and they are almost exclusively soarers. They live for 60 years. And they have a well-developed social system. So in a lot of ways, I think they're more like people, more like human societies, more like humans than most birds. And of course, they were brought almost to extinction. They were completely extinct in the wild and had to be bred in captivity and then reintroduced. I saw some California condors when I was on sabbatical, and I remember standing on the bridge and looking up and just staying there, and they're breathtaking and awe-inspiring. And when I go back to that moment, what it helps me remember is that no matter how messed up things are, No matter how far afield we've gone from what's right and true and good, human beings have an almost limitless capacity to find our way back, to find creative solutions, to find ways to come back from the brink. And of course, that's what's needed in this moment of sea change, in this moment of transition, in this moment of unrest and confusion, in this time of stress and uncertainty. Beloveds, look to each other, always look to each other, and trust the ingenuity in our species, and trust the love that will hold us up, just like the thermals help those condors soar. So be it, and so may it be. Our closing reading is Caged Bird by Maya Angelou. A free bird leaps on the back of the wind and floats downstream till the current ends, and dips his wing in the orange sun rays and dares to claim the sky. But a bird that stalks down his narrow cage can seldom see through his bars of rage. His wings are clipped and his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. The caged bird sings with a fearful trill of things unknown but longed for still, and his tune is heard on the distant hill, for the caged bird sings of freedom. The free bird thinks of another breeze, and the trade wind soft through the sighing trees, and the fat worms waiting on a dawn-bright lawn, and he names the sky his own. But a caged bird stands on the grave of dreams. His shadow shouts on a nightmare scream. His wings are clipped and his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. The caged bird sings with a fearful trill of things unknown but longed for still, and his tune is heard on the distant hill, for the caged bird sings of freedom.